Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly discussion series that's hosted by the Chaldean Cultural Center in collaboration with the U of M Detroit Center, Unique Voices in Films, and CMN TV. I'm your host, Am Nemu, and our special guest today is Scott Rosenfelt. Hi, Scott.
Hi.
So, and by the way, in May, this is May, so we are celebrating Jewish Heritage Month. And Scott is one of Hollywood's most successful independent producers. On the strength of such films as Home Alone, Smoke Signals, Mystic Pizza, and Teen Wolf, he has garnered international acclaim and recognition. He has just delivered the first season of the series, Cell Block, to Amazon Studios, which he produced in the Philippines in partnership with Black Ops Asia. He's the executive producer of Pomegranate, the first Iraqi American feature narrative, which is to date has won over 40 awards. And yeah, and that's something very special to us, of course. Um, Scott, one thing we've talked a lot, but one topic we've never really talked about is your childhood, where you were born, and the influences that led you to your film career.
Wow. Let's see. It's so long ago, I barely remember. I was born in Pennsylvania, in Easton, Pennsylvania, a small town on the New Jersey border, about an hour and a half from New York, an hour and a half from Philadelphia. So it was a small town, but it was kind of, pretty accessible to major cities, which I spent time in as a child with my parents. And my father had been from Philadelphia, and we went to New York a lot to see plays and sporting events, etc. And as a kid, growing up in that town, predominantly blue collar town, I was um, by the time I was in about fifth grade, I knew. Well, I had interest in being a writer. I hadn't really thought about film. I really a novelist, short story writer, and at the same time, I was athletic, so I was playing basketball and baseball. I ultimately had a tryout in baseball for a major league team, but I wanted to be a writer, and I was a journalist in high school, won some awards and things like that, and went to college my freshman year at Boston University for journalism. And as I was going through after my first semester, I wasn't really unhappy with journalism, but I took a writing class, a short story writing class, in my second semester of my freshman year, and it really opened something up inside of me. And one of the assignments one week was to write a short screenplay, which I had never even seen, let alone written. And I wrote it, and I felt very comfortable with the style. I read certain screenplays, and I looked at them for the first time. I had been a movie fan, but not anything technical at all. And I thought this was pretty good. I enjoyed this a great deal, and I sort of got bitten by the bug. I was writing reviews for the school, one of the school newspapers. It was called the Free Press, and I ultimately thought, I'm going to look into film schools, see what it's like. And at the time, it was pretty easy to figure out. On the East Coast, it was NYU. On the West Coast, it was UCLA and USC. I did have a lot of interest in Los Angeles and going there, but not quite ready yet. So I transferred to NYU. And once I got to NYU, I found like I had, in essence, found my family, that that's what I wanted to do. And I just took off from there, graduated and worked in New York for a year after graduation as a production assistant on movies such as Saturday Night Fever, a amazing movie, small movie called Short Eyes, which was a prison drama that had won the Pulitzer Prize for drama while on stage. And and then I moved to LA. I moved to LA in the summer of 1977, and essentially never looked back, and just went progressively up the ladder through being an assistant, a production manager, into producing, into the kinds of movies that I've been known for.
So how did you get involved? Well, Home Alone, I want to mention that is widely
Mhm.
regarded as a classic and remains the highest grossing live action comedy of all time. What do you think? So first of all, how did you even get involved in that? And what do you think contributed to its immense success?
Well, I got involved because John Hughes had apparently seen Mystic Pizza and liked it. Um, he hadn't really ever made independent film himself, but apparently he was pretty well versed and was read a lot and watched a lot. Very interesting guy, and he had seen it and liked it. And he wanted to bring the producers of it to his movie. So I got a call from his lawyer, and oddly enough, the first call was about coming to meet and to work on a movie called Career Opportunities, which was a movie that John had written and was about to be made. And they sent the studio. It was Warner Brothers had sent the script, and I'm sorry, it was actually it was Warner Brothers, and I read the script, and it was weird because I'd been a John Hughes fan. All the great movies, Pretty in Pink and Breakfast Club and Trains, Planes and Ferris Bueller. But I would have to say that Career Opportunities was not at the top of his writing pantheon. and and it seemed derivative and not that interesting to me. However, being in the position of just wanting to work at the studios, there's a I would kind of you go into a meeting with somebody like John Hughes for the first time, and you have to either be you can't you should never be like, oh God, it's great, it's the best thing ever written, it's better than Citizen Kane. At the same time, you're not sure, do you tell John Hughes, well, it's not so good, right? So we had a meeting, and John was very direct. The meeting started. He said, "So, what do you think of the script?" And I was there with my partner. My partner was kicking me under the table because he knew I might say something. And I said, uh, "It's pretty good." That's what I said. It's pretty good. And John, pretty perceptive, went, "Now, come on, now, tell me what you really thought." And I looked at him, and again, my partner really was kicking me. I said, "It's okay." And he said, "Yeah, I know, you're right. It needs a lot of work, but I like your work from Mystic Pizza as producers. The director was somebody we knew. I think you guys can make Career Opportunities better, and that was the whole reason for bringing you." And he thanked us. We left. My partner was kind of mad at me for like dissing John Hughes, and about 5 days later, we got a call from his lawyer. John was not that direct. Usually somebody called you, not him. And the lawyer said, "John really enjoyed meeting you, but he's going to hire somebody else to do Career Opportunities." And my partner said, "See, I told you. You should have kept your mouth shut." And
Yeah, that's
so,
not like you, Scott, to do that though.
yeah. So, I mean, a few weeks went by, and I was starting to doubt myself because it was a really important time. This was like 1999, 91, where the independent world that I had been in was disappearing. The studios had bought up a bunch of the independent distributors. They were bringing them in house instead of, so the vivaciousness of the independent world was going through a transition at the time, and it was time to make a studio movie. It was time to make the jump. So it was important to get a job at the studios. And from my partner's perspective, I was basically dumping on the first opportunity. Well, lo and behold, finally after about 4 weeks, being a little depressed and thinking maybe I shouldn't have been so direct, I came home one day, and in the front of the door of my condo that I had was an envelope from, and I got closer to the envelope, and on the envelope was a Warner Brothers sticker, which I never got before. I was an independent filmmaker. I never got anything from the studio. And I opened up the package, and it was from an executive at Warner Brothers saying, "John Hughes would like you to read the script. Let us know what you think." And it turned out to be Home Alone. And I started reading the script about 15 pages in. I was I was like laughing not because it was funny. It was funny. I was laughing because of the quality difference between career opportunities, down here and Home Alone all the way up here. I was like flabbergasted how much better it was. And I went into the studio, met with them. They said, John wants you to come to Chicago, meet him with the director. I said, who's the director? They said, well, we don't want to say yet, and it was like, why do they don't want to say who the director is? All right, I don't know. So I flew to Chicago, first class airfare, limos, stuff I had never done before, having been an independent producer, get to the hotel in Chicago, the Four Seasons, of course, and I'm in my room, and the phone rings, and it's John. He's on his cell phone, one of the three people in the world at the time who had a cell phone, the one hooked up to your car. And he said, we'll meet you in the lobby in about 20 minutes. Come on down and we'll go out to dinner. I said, who are you with? I want, and he wouldn't tell me. He wouldn't tell me who the director was because the director was with him. It's like, okay. So I go down to the lobby and I see John because I knew what he looked like. And he's standing next to Chris Columbus, who went to NYU. I knew him we were friends, just socially. And Chris was like, Scott. I said, Chris. And John said, oh, you guys know each other. And I was like, yeah, I don't know why. What was all this subterfuge about not telling me a week ago who the director? It was a whole silly thing from the studio. So we had dinner. We talked about the project. It went really well, really well. So John said, "Yeah, can't wait. I'm going to pick you guys up tomorrow morning. We're going to do a little location scout. I want to show you all the locations." So I'm back in the room. 15 minutes later, the phone rings in the room. I don't have a cell phone, of course. John does. He had just dropped Chris off at his in-laws, and he said, I'm really glad this happened because when we met to talk about career opportunities, I knew it wasn't the right project for you. He was saying that to me. It was not the right project for you. I knew I had to find something better. So that's why I wanted to send you Home Alone. And I thanked him and I hung up. And to this day, it gives me kind of a kind of feeling about that moment because John knew that I had told him the truth about career opportunities without telling him it's awful, right? But he knew he had to find something better for me, let alone me wanting to work with John Hughes. Who the hell am I, right? But John Hughes was saying, I wanted to find something that would challenge you. And that's how Home Alone happened. And, it was remarkable. And that's, there were other things that happened after that with the studio, but a lot of people know about that. It went from one studio to another, but that's how the relationship started. And that's how the movie started with John.
Yeah, and we had spoken one time about that because we ended up learning that my teacher, Lynn V. Andrews, her former husband, had worked in the studio that you were making Home Alone, and you guys ended up having to change studios. And I was going to ask you, like,
That's right. Right.
when you face these challenges, um, how did you deal with that? So you're fairly a new producer, and you have this big project at hand, and as a filmmaker, I see like what the littlest thing that happens, I was stressing out. And by the way, you whenever I came to you with a problem, you were like laughing. And I have to say, I wrote this in I wrote a memoir about this, and there's a chapter about the making of Pomegranate, and I wrote
Mm-hmm.
how your laughter made me realize like how tiny the problem was, and it actually calmed me down. But I remember we would be on calls because you'd be in the Philippines, and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning my time and
Right.
3 daytime by you. And a few things happened that really stressed me out. So I appreciated your advice, but always
Sure.
before the advice you would laugh. Like, oh, this always happens, oh, this is no big deal. And that calmed me down to where I even was able to listen to the advice. And you shared the one story about what happened in the studio. So if you would
Right.
share that, just to show that, despite everything, how a producer can get past through a lot of challenges.
Yeah. Well, I can talk about it. I mean, it's been bandied about now and then, but no one's ever, I'm expecting someday to write kind of my own memoir in case anybody actually cares and to go into detail about it because it's never been gone into heavy detail. But what happened was John had essentially promised Warner Brothers that the movie would cost $10 million. And Bob Daly had said to him, if you can make this Home Alone for 10 million, we'll do it, right? Because Warner Brothers was known as a star-driven studio. They still were heavy into Clint Eastwood and Mel Gibson and the Lethal Weapon movies and Kevin Costner, I think, and other things. They were always star-driven. So when John said, "I have a movie that has a 9-year-old kid as the star," they weren't happy. It wasn't their thing. But they said to John, okay, they had to deal with John. They obviously liked him as a filmmaker, of course, and said, okay, but if you can do this for $10 million, we'll do it. John said, sure. Now, he may have meant it. Look, John wasn't a producer in the sense of like knowing that stuff, right? Yes, he was from an umbrella, treetop point of view. He was a producer, but I mean, he wouldn't really know. You can do it for 10, you can do it for 9. I mean, it's not his thing. So of course, what's he going to do? He's like most filmmakers. He goes, sure. So he writes the script. They like it. They greenlight it. They hire all of us, and we're in pre-production. And then they say, okay, it was weird because usually in the independent world, of course, you have to do the budget way before you make the movie. In this case, we were in Chicago in our first couple of weeks of prep, working on the budget. Okay, which new for me, but so we were working on the budget. Now, unfortunately, no one no one from any side told us about this $10 million thing, including John, I must say. And so we worked on the budget, myself, my partner, other people in production, and it came out to about 13 and change. We were pretty happy with it. We turned it into the studio, and they were like, this was just before Christmas, and dead silence. Like nobody said anything, like nothing, like no thank you, no anything. And over Christmas, we all took a break. We came back to Chicago and we started to get into pre-production again. But then we were saying things like, okay, we need to buy lumber, right? We need to build sets. Well, Warners would say, don't buy any lumber yet. Oh, well, we need to make an offer to these actors. We have these actors we want, right? No, don't make any hard offers yet. So something was up. Something was up internally. We didn't know what it was. And then one day, finally, John came into the office, said, well, we were supposed to do this movie for 10. He didn't exactly take the blame, but that's okay. And it's not. So they're giving me trouble. And, what do you guys think? And we said, look, I mean, it's 13.5. How bad is that? Studio movies were costing much more than that even then, right? And he said, yeah, I know. They should make the movie. So basically, it went through, internal stuff at Warner Brothers where various people were more or less given the opportunity to fight for it who didn't. Those are the things I'd rather talk about another time. So basically, Bob Daly and Terry Semel, who are running the show, shut it down. Said, okay, well, if you don't think it's worth 13.5 or whatever we were at, we're going to shut it down. We're going to put it in turnaround. They put it in turnaround, but we had a couple of conversations with a different studio who was prepared to step in if that happened, which turned out to be 20th Century Fox. So I was in Chicago. I literally got a phone call from an executive of Warner Brothers saying, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. You're in turnaround, you're shut down. And I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? But I, hung up the phone, called an executive at Fox, Tom Jacobson, who I happened to know and had worked with before. Tom was now working with Joe Roth, who is the new president of the studio, who I also knew, and said, hey, Tom, Warner Brothers just put it in Turner, and he said, "Don't drop anything. You're now a Fox picture." And we continued right just seamlessly, which I don't think that ever happened before, and I don't think that's ever happened since. And we became a Fox picture, and at 13.5 or whatever we were at the time, and we made the movie. We made the movie, but it was there were a lot of little details in there that were, I'd rather write my own memoir, but that is the story. I mean, that's
And when you
what
do
happened.
write it, Scott, I would be totally interested to read it myself and the whole pomegranate crew because and talent because I was talking to the other editor the other day and we were both remembering how we had seen Home Alone in the theaters and we were like nonstop laughing, not knowing that one day we would have the honor of working
Oh,
with you.
well,
I mean, that was, but it was such a great movie. And I remember when you were saying how you laughed at the script, I remember we were just cracking up. I mean, it was, and it still is such a great movie. So, and now the next question, and we haven't also really talked about this, is that were there ways, or any ways that your Jewish heritage influenced your career choices, or there's stories that you chose to tell through your work? I know you have
uh,
some Middle Eastern, you did a Middle Eastern
yeah,
documentary, but I'm just
yeah.
wondering if your heritage
Well,
made,
um,
influence them.
you know, Hollywood is a fickle place, and even most of the Jewish executives, of which there, as we know, there are one or two in the industry, or in writers and directors, etc. Um, it's not so much a question, unfortunately, of self-hatred, although there's a modicum of that. It's let's steer away from what we like because we want to make what everybody likes, not just what we like. Filmmakers tend to want to make films that they like, right? Unless you're a big commercial filmmaker, indie filmmakers want to make, stories that interest them that they hope broaden out to an audience. So I finally got a chance to do that after Home Alone. I directed a movie called Family Prayers, which starred Joe Mantegna, Ann Archer, Paul Reiser, and Patty LuPone, and it was about a young boy who was about to have his bar mitzvah, and his parents were splitting up at the same time, played by Joe and Ann. And the kid felt not only did he have to prepare himself for his bar mitzvah, but he had to keep his parents together. And it was a drama, some humor in it, of course. And it was made at Columbia TriStar at the time. And, I directed it. I didn't write it. I was one of the producers. And I put a lot into it because it was, my own background being Jewish and all of those things. My parents didn't split up, but I did care about it. But at the same time, my own values in life tend to skew toward the general humanistic of stories that I love stories about cultures. Mystic Pizza, they were Portuguese. Critical thinking, it was the Latino community primarily in Florida. Um, I made African American film Stride, and a bunch of things that I've done. I tend to work in cultures and smoke signals, most especially. My own favorite film because it dealt with the Native American population. But ultimately, what I love about those movies and the feel of them is that you want to make something that highlights some interesting differences, cultural differences, food, other things. But ultimately, the stories are we're all the same. That's important to me, that we are all the same, which is really how I felt about Pomegranate too. So I never really felt like I had to look for Jewish themed movies because I felt who I am as a Jewish person, not that religious, but I felt that I was putting myself into everything, no matter what. The essence of who I am and what I believe spiritually, as a producer, writer, director, would be a part of that, whether it was a Jewish film or not. Not that important to me. Um, you know, right now we're in a different problem going on, but we don't have to talk about that. There's enough going on about that. but I never thought that I had to make that. I mean, I made, the film in Syria had more to do with, what was going on in Aleppo and how Assad was, destroying the country, and had a journal. It was a documentary, of course, showing what was going on between the Syrian army and people fighting in Syria. But and I have a couple projects. I have a project that's a wonderful love story, true story about an Israeli woman and an Iranian Muslim man who fall in love and get married, but can't find anywhere where they're allowed to live together. And it's called Nowhere in the World. And frankly, right now I have an Israeli producing partner who's lovely, an Israeli born director who lives in LA. And we're having trouble right now because everybody's fearful. Agents, as much as I hate to say this, agents in Hollywood who have no, coyones are telling people, my Jewish client doesn't want to play Jewish right now. Everybody's a little scared. And I find it to be, pretty despicable, quite honestly. But that's what's going on. So we're having trouble mounting it. It will probably get mounted at some point. But those kinds of movies, and I have a couple other things like that. So, I don't find, I find I'm a little bit more strident about it right at the moment because of what's going on, in the Middle East and our country. But but I don't feel like I always had to write or tell Jewish stories. I felt like whatever I was putting into them, I was putting in who I am, and I'm not religious. I have family members who are, and I respect it, but I'm not. It's just not my thing. But I do care about a lot of people, not just Jewish people. So that's why I haven't really focused on that specifically as much as maybe I could.
So I can attest to you caring so much. When we had our name involved with the pomegranate, and during pre-production, we were getting similar emails from people that wanted to get some jobs, whether it was like their music scene or. And I remember that you, on a couple of occasions, I told you, well, we already have a composer, and you said, okay, just make sure that you respond to him. You did that a couple of times, and I thought it meant, it said a lot about you, that you care a lot. You don't want this person. So I made sure that whoever reached out, even if I got busy and swarmed with all these emails and all these
Right.
requests, I put myself in their shoe and realized,
Yeah.
that I did not have, especially, I mean, 10 years ago, I remember I was trying to make a film and I had to put it away, and I had tears all over because I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm never going to make a film. And, but I did eventually. But I would have appreciated that kind of kindness from people, that rather than
Yeah.
kind of
I,
just, ignore me or think like, oh, another filmmaker kind of attitude. And I learned that really from you. And so those little things that you did throughout the process really were a testament to who you are as a person. It's not just about being a filmmaker.
yeah, I believe in that. I get a lot of solicitation, and it'd be really easy in my position to just hit delete. And I don't. I just decided I came out of film school once. I was a PA. I needed people to be good to me along the way. Some were and some weren't. I remember the ones who were, and I always remember, be kind. It's not hard to be kind. It's these people who think, well, I'm in this position. Of course, I'm just going to hit delete. Who cares, right? Who cares about this? Nobody. And I don't feel that way, and I still don't. I even when people send me screenplays, 90% of the time, unless I'm just totally swamped, I'll say thank you. I'm writing right now. I do not have the time to take on anything new. Good luck with it. I at least say something, and even people looking for work, I say something because I mean it's really just the right thing to do.
I mean, you know what you're saying. By the way, after you do it for so long, you realize it's an easier thing to do, because even you feel kind of bad as things like uh, get overwhelming and all these
Hmm.
emails pile up. If you respond to them, there's something that happens that actually even makes you feel good.
Yeah,
And
I know.
there's, yeah, so it actually it feels takes weight off of you to respond. So I learned that, and I like it. And I want to ask, I know you've shared with us what you liked about the story Pomegranate. Everything that you said previously too about regarding choosing work, not basing it just on your heritage. But I remember your response when you read it really had nothing, it had to do like with the humor, with the story. And that's what I loved about you, is that that's what you focused on. So you were not scared, worried that, some of the responses I had gotten in the past is like, well, this, it's like an Arab American story. Oh, people don't know who the Chaldeans are. There was always some kind of an excuse. There were reasons that I actually felt they were the good reasons to even give this script a chance, because it was showing
Right.
our people in a way that are normally uh, are not shown. Now, you respected that and you saw that, and I just want you to share that a little bit about what you saw in it that drew you to the story.
Well, I thought um, the society of Chaldeans or Iraqis or even Iranians referred to in the script, of course, and others was still underrepresented in the U.S. There's a lot of fear, right? There's a lot of fear that they're all here to kill white people and all that kind of silly stuff. And and the movie to me spoke again to that universal humanity, the same issues about family, about adjusting to a new society and how you do that. That came out in great detail with the brother who had some of the great lines about, you got us here and we're supposed to be Americans, but now we're still acting like we're back, in the old country. What's the point? I'm not even allowed to act like an American, right? I'm still, I'm not allowed to date or kiss or anything. It's great. And those are things that older people who bring their children have to sort of come to terms with, that they're in a new place. I see that. I just made shot a pilot in Queens, New York, about the Chinese American community, which is sort of a Chinese American version of Sex in the City. And I worked on it with Chinese friends, Chinese American friends, and there were a lot of the same thing. The mothers having to come to terms with daughters in their 20s and 30s, highly educated, but they're still treating them like it's a village out outside of Chengdu, and they have to learn how to let their children grow up as Americans, and have their culture, absolutely have their culture, but not under the thumb of arranged marriage and all the kinds of things that still happen. And I just felt exploring all of that was really interesting to me. And part of it was because I was interested in it. There might be somebody else who said, who cares, right? But I didn't. I thought it was interesting, fresh, and relatable. And those were the reasons, and funny. And I talked about that a lot, excuse me, with you. You know, um, I kept thinking about My Big Fat Greek Wedding in a way because of the humor mixed with the drama and all of that. And it all had all of those great feelings that I think, stories like this are better also when they have humor. Heavy dramas in this world, I don't know that the majority of an audience wants to see. They might have a little indie crowd and festival crowd, but I don't know if they really translate. And I thought what you did with the humor was great, and really made it ultimately relatable to a wider audience.
Well, everything you're saying, like, no, so I knew the script is good. I love the script, obviously, when I made it, when I see the film and the humor in it. But having somebody outside of your community
Hmm.
also seeing that and believing in that and being from Hollywood, you help dispel. a lot of stereotypes that, and in some cases, of course, stereotypes are true, but there are people that do care, that are in the field. And I think you proved that if a person really just focuses on the story and not be feeling, sometimes they say, well, it's who you know. Well, we didn't know each other. The
Right.
story is the one that had the legs to put all of this together.
Yeah.
And the whole relationship, I think, it just proves really that if you have a good story and you keep, and the persistence, that there are people like yourself. They might not be the majority, but there are people like yourself in Hollywood that care about
Uh,
these, because otherwise, how are independent, there's a lot of independent films that have been made. Maybe it's not
yeah.
easy, but again, you're a testament that there are people that care, and these are the exact stories that they're looking for. And I don't know, but to me, as somebody from the Middle East, especially as a woman that didn't really even find so much support in my own community, because this is not an area that we have explored. My message to Middle Easterners is really just to focus on that, focus on having a good story, not feeling like, oh, well, you know what, it's the Hollywood is run by the Jewish, they're probably not going to let us get our story across, or they only want this kind of story, or that might be true to a certain degree, but there are always the ones that don't believe the same way.
Yeah.
So you have taught, you've had several educational roles. So you served as a professional in residence in Quinnipiac. How do you?
Quinnipiac.
Okay, yeah,
Quinnipiac.
university. You've been a guest lecturer at the Beijing Film Academy, Harvard's Department of Government, the American University in Paris, Tisch School at New York University, Boston University, UCLA, Yale, many universities that you spoke with. Um, Also, you're a member of the Directors Guild of America, the Writers Guild of America, and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. So, I mean, honestly, like, you've accomplished so much that you make this time to teach. So, given your expertise and you caring about new filmmakers, like independent filmmakers, what what advice would you give, or do you normally give aspiring filmmakers?
Well, I mean, you have to kind of decide there are sort of two worlds. I wouldn't call them two businesses. There are two worlds. There's the world of making more personal style films for lower budgets and finding an audience through that. And there are certainly independent filmmakers who keep doing that, slightly bigger and bigger. Um, you know, and then there's the ones who get to direct something, but really have their eye on studio blockbuster work and to build a commercial career. And they are different. They are different. There are some obvious crossover people, and Ang Lee started, of course, making smaller movies, Taiwanese American, and then moving into much larger studio style pictures. Not always Asian themed, obviously, sometimes, and not always. Um, but you kind of have to decide, who are you? You know, what do I want to say, or is it not about what I want to say? I just want to be somebody who can really execute as a director, right? And I can, whether I'm Iraqi, Iranian, Israeli, Chinese, French, I could make a Marvel movie, right? It doesn't matter. You don't need to be a certain thing to make a Marvel movie. So but that's different than continuing a style or a type of movie that continues to be personal, that you have something to say. So both are different, and both really have different tracks. And one is a little lonelier than the other because, all that independent thing and the personal films of course, tend to be smaller, and you have to build an audience. Sometimes it starts small, sometimes it never gets more than a little bit bigger. And you have to figure out if that's what you want to do. There's other people who cross over. Chloe Zhao had made independent films for years. She finally, crossed over all this I always space on the name, but the movie with Frances McDormand that won the Academy Award a couple years ago, and then she made a Marvel movie. So, that's somebody who went from indie to big time, after many years of working and making independent films. And that was probably something she wanted to do. It was probably was like, I'd like to try that, right? I'd like to try that now. Now that people know who I am in the indie world, I'd like to I'd like to get paid more money, to be honest. And I'd like to try something with a bigger canvas. And whether or not it worked, I'm not here to say. But and there's other people who don't want to do that. There are other directors who say, thank you, but I don't even know how to make a horror film, or I don't know how to make one of those big studio movies, right? I only know how to do my thing. So, you have to really think it through. Whether you're a writer and a director, whether you're just a director, whether you're just a writer, and I don't mean just, but or a producer, all of it has a conversation for all of them about, and then how to build a strategy for yourself to get from A to B to C to D to E and to get there. I worked backwards. I came to LA from New York after graduating from NYU, and I wanted to write, and I was, writing screenplays. I wasn't selling, but I was writing. I got an agent, and then I started getting PA work because I had the background from NYU. I could work on a set, right? So I got more and more PA work. People liked me. Oh, you should move up. You should. How about this really low budget movie? Work as a production manager. Worked as a production manager and started learning schedule and budget and all kinds of stuff. Um, and I did that for a little while, and that moved me into away from writing. I kept moving away from writing, but I then started moving from production managing into finding my own material and producing. And that took off, and I put writing aside. I didn't pick up writing other than working with writers, working with great writers and giving notes and, really digging into scripts for years. But I didn't really write until about 7 years ago, where I was old enough. I was like, if I'm going to write, I better start doing it now, or I have to like keep my mouth shut, right? So I started writing, and a couple people liked my work, and I wrote something that got me into the Writers Guild, and somebody else hired me to do something. Then I wrote a couple things that were things that I'm a producer on, and there's things now that have reasonably large directors attached. So in hindsight, I would have loved to have been writing for the past 40 years, 30 years, to be honest, because I really enjoy it. And I like producing, I like being on the set, but at some point, I also like being alone in my house writing. I like both, right? After being alone for 3 months on the script, sometimes I want to get back out on the set, or I want to be around people. So I like both worlds, and I can do both. There aren't a lot of people who don't just there's getting a producing credit, but that doesn't mean you're a producer. There aren't many people who can actually produce a movie like I can, who can write a movie or can direct a movie. I just directed a TV pilot, and I directed a movie, in 1991. I can, and I'm in the DGA, so I could do any one of three. I could do all of them, or I could do them separately. It doesn't, it's depending on the project, right? So I've learned a lot of disciplines. It's important when I'm dealing with other filmmakers because nobody can really BS me very much because I know the issues related to producing, writing, and directing really well. I've also worked on sets. I've done just about every job on the set except for hair and makeup and wardrobe, but I've done pretty much everything else. So even
And
while I'm on a set,
now I know why when I email you about like random things, you're able to right away respond about whether it's like the script. Because I remember like we went through the
right?
script, we tightened the script in the beginning before we even started. There
Yeah,
was so many areas that we discussed and it was, and now when you're explaining all of that, like we didn't go into the history of the things that you've done, but you've really done everything, all the ins
Yeah.
and outs. Yeah. Um, you know, uh, in the memoir, which by the way, it's called Little Baghdad because
Mm,
that's where Pomegranate was shot in a city
right.
called Sterling Heights, which is nicknamed Little Baghdad. And
Hmm.
in the memoir, I talk about how this film, working on the set with, we were white, black, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, we had everybody. I call it an interfaith experience. Okay. That it was, to me,
Hmm.
um, having that experience working on a set, we became like family during that time. I mean, we were already
Yeah.
getting close before, but when we were on the set working in the same, like, only a couple of locations, that closeness that it created and that caring. So I thought that if people only work on that level and create something beautiful together, this kind of can help heal a lot of wounds, and it kind of strengthens people of different diversity. And I don't know if you want to share something regarding some of the things that are happening recently. I feel like our young people's energies, young people who are probably enormously creative, that, how can we use our energies or creativity to build something from our differences, so we are the same in that regards. We all like love, and we all have certain, want freedoms in life, and most of us really do want like justice for others. But let's say, like, for filmmakers or storytellers, how can they unite to help make something positive of this? Because I got this far, and it was not easy as a woman of Middle Eastern background. Having my script get to
Right.
this point was not easy at all. But I realized that, it's possible. It wasn't easy, but it's possible. And that, why don't we make more films? Why don't we get our stories out there? Why don't we put our energies out there? But what I'm seeing right now between the Jews and the Middle Easterners and even non-Middle Easterners, just all that's happening. Do you have like an advice that you would give, seeing that, or is it too chaotic right now to even make sense of what's happening? How can people use their creativity to do something better in the world?
Uh, as hard as it is, putting aside, my own personal feelings, which are complicated, as with, probably many American Jews. I'm not particularly a Netanyahu fan. Neither are the majority of the Israelis. However, in the situation, there's not much one could do about it. Seeing what are called pro-Palestinian rallies at even where I went, NYU, and seeing people, throw things at Jewish students and, keep chanting from the river to the sea is breaks my heart because first of all, nobody seems to understand the real history of this region, and nobody seems to care about who was there first, who was there second, who was there 1,000 years ago. There were, in 1948, there were something like 2 million Jews in Palestine, 150 Palestinians, but miraculously, all of these people seem to think it's their country. When a lot of Arabs, Saudi Arabians, and others will tell you that there really is no such thing as a Palestinian. They're an amalgam of different tribes that have sort of been mushed together that have been thrown out of multiple countries, including Jordan. We all know about that, 1970, right? And the Black September, how 500,000, Palestinians, tried to overthrow the king of Jordan, right? And they got kicked out of Jordan. So everybody's forgetting all of that. And now it's just Israel's fault. Now, nobody protested against Assad when he was killing, what, 300, 400,000 Muslims. What's happening in Yemen, Muslims were being killed. Look what's happening with Russia. Where are all these same people? Why aren't they having a cap for all of those things? They're only having a cap when it deals with Jewish people, which I never thought would happen. And I don't want my kids going through that. And it's an awful feeling. So I think ultimately, however you feel, and by the way, I'm not saying Israel has done everything perfectly. They have not. But the fact that everybody who speaks has already forgotten what happened on October 7th. You hear people talking about Israel genocide, Israel genocide. Oh wait, oh yes, right. There was, oh yeah, this little thing happened, but Hamas had the right to do it. You see kids on college campuses wearing Hamas, headbands, and LGBTQ and gay organizations for Hamas, not realizing that if they went over there, they'd be slaughtered. They would kill them before they kill the Jew. They hate them even more. These people are just not paying attention. Having said that, that's my personal feeling. In terms of how to deal with that or deal with it the other way, if you really feel strongly about, the Palestinian population, I think people have to um, make films. I mean, that's what I do. I make films. I don't make speeches. I make films. I write scripts. I make films, and I try my best. Even though I'm even dealing with it, like I said, a couple Jewish actors, God forbid, big names who are telling their agents, "Don't bring me anything Jewish right now." So it's horrible. It's just horrible that
Oh,
they feel that way. But even so, whether you make a film like yours, which isn't it's political in the sense about the hijab, but it's not like we're not dealing with this issue.
right.
You know, what happens is you make it for a lot less money, right? You find the money and you make your film. You find the money and you make your film. You don't expect anybody in Hollywood to be involved because they won't. You won't get funded and they might like it when it's done. You got a distribution deal from a Hollywood company, but they're not going to help you along the way. Nobody will. You have to figure it out, and people have to figure out how to do it. I mean, and do small movies, get their voice out there, and whatever that is. I respect people who are in my sense, on the other side. If it's a literate, thoughtful point of view or a conversation that can be had, not screaming, not now. This morning I read that where in UCLA the encampments or wherever they're taking names. Like if somebody walks by and they think they're Jewish, they're like going, "Are you a Zionist?" And they're like putting a check mark next to their name or something. It's terrible,
Yeah,
terrible, terrible what's going on, and it's a um, I'm horrified by it. I'm horrified by being in this country when this should be the place that's the best place in the world, and it is for a lot of people. But right now, uh, I just after the Holocaust and being too young for that, but growing up with parents and hearing stories, of course, to have this this rampant no conversation about Assad killing hundreds of thousands of Muslims and Yemen and other places where that has occurred, or what's going on in Myanmar right now, which everybody should be protesting. I have a screenplay about Myanmar. Me, little old me. Nobody else. Nobody. None of these people are paying any attention to what the junta and Myanmar is doing to its people, or what the Chinese are doing to the Uyghurs, right? They're all focused on the Jews. It's the Jews, right? It's we all laugh about it being Jewish. Like it's like when all these politicians talk about whenever they want to have a crutch, they go George Soros. Poor the guy's an old man, and it's all his fault, right? We hear about that in politics. Well, Soros is behind this. Soros, it's like the poor guy's, I don't know, 90 years old. Leave him alone. You
yeah.
know,
It's really not taking responsibility. I think
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not taking responsibility for your own actions, for your own life. And when you were saying, I really appreciate your wisdom in regards to, when I did originally when I started writing Pomegranate, the part about the hijab was secondary. The part that got me to start writing it is because there was so much tension during the 2016 elections, and rather than
yeah.
get in
I know. Yeah,
and that like internet fighting kind of thing, I said, what am I going to do with my energy? My creative energy? I decided to put it into the script, which look where it's at now, instead of like going out there and trying to go off on
Right.
on people. But you know what that did for me, by the way? It taught me so much because I was writing about a Muslim woman, a young woman living across the street of a conservative Christian. The Muslim woman was liberal. In writing it, I actually learned so much. I learned to look at the different perspectives that I failed to do before I got so involved
Right.
in the story. And as a storyteller, that's part of the thing, is kind of like stepping out from getting too involved in the subject matter and seeing other people's points of views. And I want to say something regarding October 7th, which also surprised me. My husband and I, we were on a trip on a cruise with all these Iraqis. And when we saw what was happening on TV, I looked at him and we were so confused for a minute, because this is what happened in some of these scenes were the same that
Yeah.
happened in our villages in Iraq. Um, and so I remember when I posted something, how sad that was and how it reminded me of that. People were upset that I was bothered by the sight of October 7th. This is before the war. And then I thought, wait a minute, what's happening here? I would feel this way no matter who it happened to, but particularly because this reminded me of what happened with ISIS, which nobody did,
Hmm.
by the way, protest when right
That's
now
right. That's right.
my parents' village, where my parents were born, my grandparents, which has had the largest population of Chaldeans, wiped out.
Mm.
There was no protest. The U.S. government
That's
did
right.
consider it a genocide, but but
Right.
I understand that the Muslims also, Shia was affected by ISIS, because many were killed as a result. There was the Yazidis, so we're not denying anybody else, but there was no protest for all the Muslims, the Christians, the Yazidis that were killed. 2014, we were protesting, but we were a small community in comparison, and really nothing. So I was bothered that people were bothered, that I was just heartbroken about what happened on October 7th, as any human being should be.
Right. Uh,
If,
I,
if
I,
Chaldeans if Chaldeans did that to anybody, I would be even more heartbroken that our
right.
community would do something like that. So,
I
you
mean,
know, it's
there's things on X and there where people say, "Oh, the Israelis staged it" and all that kind of stuff. It's 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 despicable. It's just despicable that this our world has turned upside down, and we I don't I just don't understand how people have. There's every time you read something from we talk about, well, there's all these normal, I'm sorry to use this word, but normal Palestinians. Well, we're not really sure, right? Because when they were Hamas was dragging naked Israeli women through the streets in the back of their jeeps, dead. Uh, a lot of those normal Palestinians were out in the street, and they throwing candies in the air. They're throwing candies in the air. Oh, they're so happy. The naked Jewish girl was being dragged. All the normal Palestinians were doing that. Maybe not the kids, but their parents. They were out there cheering and clapping and cheering and clapping for the dead Israelis being dragged around. So that's why Israel is taking such a strong point of view, because they know that you know is there a peace loving normal Palestinian? Probably. Are there as many as the rest of the world has been told? Probably not. And they know that over there. They're not stupid. They're not homicidal maniacs. They were not doing anything on October 6th. In fact, that was their own fault. They weren't paying attention, but they weren't doing anything. They weren't killing Arabs on October 6th. On October 7th, 1,200, Jews and maybe other people who were at that rave were murdered. So, and all these Palestinians who say, I don't know. It's like Germany, right? What did Germans say? Well, you live half a mile from the concentration camp. there was smoke coming out of the chimneys. Didn't it smell funny? It
Oh,
might have, right?
that's
It might.
we were at the Holocaust. We visited, me and some of our team from the Chaldean Cultural Center. We visited the Holocaust Memorial Center yesterday.
Yeah.
And yeah, when they were talking about that, and one of our former executive director who used to be a teacher, and she said, yeah, that some people, didn't they think like they or they thought like, oh, is it snowing in the summer? Like, what is all that?
They
Like,
it was just like
was it
Jonathan Glazer's
snowing? You can
Jonathan
convince, yeah.
Jonathan Glazer, what he said afterwards is a whole other thing. But his movie, where Rudolf Hess's wife is tending to the garden, while in the background you see the smokestack, and she's not looking in that direction. That's what's going on, right? They're like, oh, yeah, there's something going on over there, and all they interview a Palestinian. Oh, we didn't know, and they interview doctors in the hospital. Oh, there no Hamas here, and the Hamas are like running in the background, right? And the doctors are saying there's no Hamas here. It's the Arab population, the Palestinian population has to take a really, really, really long, hard look at themselves and figure out how to fix this, because it's nobody else's fault. They've allowed tunnels, they've allowed bombs instead of schools. They have no Nobel, scientists.
And
That's what's going on.
I want to say, I mean, and I know because this is a sensitive topic, and
Yeah.
everybody feels like this is happening to them and that's happening to them. But I want to say that, all the ideas and the stereotypes that go on about how Jewish feel about the Arab community and such, when you read the script, and you were so encouraging of the fact that this was not a stereotypical
Yeah.
story, that the Arab Americans were being portrayed in a beautiful, loving way, that we really needed that. So the hurt that's coming from your end is totally given what's happened, and the fact that there was what happened on October 7th. But the way you were so supportive of the story, that really raises the beauty and the love, and especially with regards to women empowerment in the Middle Eastern community. This is a testament of you coming from a place of love and caring about these things, and not like just, so you gave this an opportunity because of that very fact. You felt like the voices are underrepresented.
Right.
And you know
Yep.
what, by the way, I just want to say one last thing too. You've done that before for a different Arab American filmmaker,
Hmm.
Lance Kawas, who was my teacher
Yeah.
in film school. When he spoke about you and how supportive you were, and he had a film that won a Nichols Award, and his film, he said, you know what, it was about a Jew. It was called The Violinist, and it was about a
Yeah.
Jew and a Muslim coming together through music. And he said, and you know what, we made the Muslim guy be the guy that gets the girl at the end of the movie.
That's right.
And all that description is really to show that what you want to give that opportunity full-heartedly, and there are
Absolutely.
people like you that are doing that, and you did that for our film. And I want to thank you so much. It meant so much to us.
You're welcome.
It's it is sad what's happening, and I hope that people find healing and use their talents to go and write a story that will help them get informed, and then help others to use their energies in different ways. Because in this country, we are able to do that. We are able to use our energies to produce rather than just, do
Yeah,
any kind of
I agree.
destruction.
Look, the minute it happened, anyway, one last thing, and this is a positive thing. The minute it happened, the first thing I thought about was when I knew it was going to go crazy, which of course is, I thought, this is how I think. I thought that Israeli mothers and Palestinian mothers should walk to the fences, meet, hold hands, hold arms, and stand there until everybody just stopped fighting. Now, I know how naive that sounds, but that's the first thing I thought. How to end this? You get 300 Israeli mothers and you get 300 Palestinian mothers who have been affected by this or not, doesn't matter. They walk to the fence, they link arms, and they tell both sides, we're not moving until you stop fighting. That was my first feeling, which of course people think I'm insanely naive, but that's the feeling I had. And it's about love and caring. It should not be about anything else.
Yeah, no terrorism, no war.
And
It's
that's how,
no
that's how the movie
terrorism, no
worked.
war. That's really what
Yep.
it comes down to.
Yep.
And Scott, thank you so much. I know, I
You're
mean,
welcome.
anybody can check you out and see that you have enormous amount of work. You're working on a million and one things, by the way, too. And I'm happy to see you so active. And I appreciate all that you've done and taking the time for this interview. It's been very
You're
informative.
welcome.
Thank you so
My
much. Thank you,
pleasure.
everybody,
My
for
pleasure.
watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.